there, thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Natasha, welcome to my channel. This video is going to be a look at all of the makeup I used up from 2017 all the way through 2021. I have it categorized by eye makeup, face makeup, and lip makeup. I also have it sorted out by cruelty-free versus non-cruelty-free, and we also look at how much I spent on makeup versus how much I used up. And then at the end, we'll look at the goals that I had set for 2021 to see if I was able to meet them, and then what goals I would like to set for 2022 based on how things have gone in the past year. But let's get started with the eye products. This past year I used 14 eye products. Last year I used 9, but in past years I've used around the same amount that I used in 2021. I think for last year I just didn't use up as many mascaras. I think that's probably the biggest difference. But when we look at the first category, brow gels, I usually use 1 a year. That's pretty standard. I use the Essence Brow Gel mostly, and I really enjoy that. That's what I'm wearing in my brows today. For brow pencils, I don't really have a ton of brow pencils. I did use up 2 from NYX that I had kind of rolling around in my collection this year, but I only have 2 brow pencils and they're both reddish for whenever I add more red to my hair. I don't really plan on buying any brow pencils anytime soon, so I don't know what this number will look like next year. For brow pomades, I had never used up one since I started tracking in 2017, and I finally used up the ABH brow pomade in the shade Taupe this year. That one took me years. I had been working on it steadily since I purchased it, which I think I bought it in 2018 if I'm not mistaken. I don't have any other brow pomades in my collection. I don't really plan on purchasing one anytime soon, so this number will likely be 0 again next year. For eyeliner pens, I usually open a fresh one at the beginning of the year, and then by the end of the year it's usually dried up. The one I have, the one from ColourPop, I think I opened it last year, earlier this year, and it's still going strong, so I do not need to pass it on. I don't need to move it out, so I don't have any eyeliner pen empties this year. I don't use those all the time. I typically go for either a pencil or a liner pot from ABH that I really like. If the eyeliner pen I'm currently using or currently have open dries up sometime next year, then this number will be 1 again, but it's not something I actively pan or actively think to reach. It's just something I have on hand in case I decide I want it. For eyelid primer, I didn't use any last year and I used up 2 this year. One of them was a mini, but it took forever to use up. I'm currently only working on 1 eye primer right now, and I plan on trying to finish that or get really close to finishing it before I bring in other eye primers, even though there are a couple that I would be interested in trying. So this number might be 0 next year, but there's still a ton left in that primer. It's from Ulta. A lot of product left in there, so it might take me longer than 2022 to use it up. So this number could be 0 or it could be 1 next year. For eyeliner pencils, I used 1, and I think I'm probably on track to use up another one next year, the one from Tilbury. This number is again pretty standard. Most of my eye products, like this is kind of the more boring category because I kind of just use the same thing every day and it takes forever to use up, so my numbers are like 1, 2, but that's just the nature of those types of products for me. And then for mascara, I used up 5. I think 2 of them were minis. Usually I use a full-size mascara for like 4 or 5 months, and then if it's a mini, I'll use it for a couple months or whenever it dries up. And then for eyeshadow, I used 2 cream matte shadows that were in palettes, and so I used up 2 eyeshadows this year. While that is exciting to finish up an entire eyeshadow, that's not really something I plan on trying to do next year. You'll see in an upcoming eyeshadow project pan introduction video that I'm going to be doing soon. If it's not out already, it will be out shortly. My focus is going to be less on trying to finish or hit pan on a bunch of eyeshadows and more on making sure everything's being rotated and I'm able to play with all of my palettes equally. So this number will likely be 0 next year, maybe 1, because I have 1 cream shadow from the Sultry palette, and that one's like probably more than halfway finished and I use it all the time, so maybe that one will be empty next year. Let's move on to something a little more fun, or at least what I think is more fun, and that's face products. This year I used up a really similar amount to what I usually use up in past years. I used 28 face products up this year, 27 last year, and then 29 the year before. I used 2 concealers, pretty standard. We'll likely have 2 or 3 concealer empties next year. For color correctors, I didn't have any this year or last year, but I do have 2 color correctors in my collection that are getting a bit up there in age, so I would like to move those out and maybe try some other formulas out there. I don't know, there's a couple brands that have color correctors that I'd like to try. For cream or liquid highlights, I use these a lot as mixers with foundation to get a more natural skin-like finish on my skin. So I used 3 of those. One of them was a mini from NYX, and I think maybe another one was also a mini, so I wasn't going through 3 full-sized cream or liquid highlighters. And I only have 1 cream highlighter stick right now in my collection, and it's enormous. It has so much product in there, so this number will likely be 0 next year. For powder highlights, I used up 3 powder highlights, which is the most I've ever used up since I started tracking, and it's pretty safe to say the most I've ever used up in a year's time. I think 1 or 2 of them were minis, and another one was one that I had already hit pan on and used a ton. It was the Mary Luminizer. I don't have any highlighters in my collection currently that are that close to being finished, and much like my eyeshadow palettes, I am going to focus more on trying to use all my highlighters evenly versus trying to focus on one and try to use up one or hit pan on one. I'll talk about that in my goals later in the video and in that Project Pan introduction that I'll do if it's not already out. For face powders, pretty standard. I used up 5 face powders. That's a combination of loose setting powders or minis or pressed powders, pretty much anything I would use to set my foundation or my under eye concealer. So that's pretty standard. I have a lot of full size, almost brand new powders in my collection, so I don't imagine that number is going to be as high as it has been in past years next year. For foundation, I used up 3. That's pretty good for me. Foundations take forever for me to use up, and I do have quite a few foundations that I've been using for years and don't have a ton of product left, so I'm hoping that this number will be around 3, or at least a couple, like at least moving out my oldest foundations. So we'll see what that number's like next year. I'm really not sure. For bronzers, I used up 3. I had 2 that had already had pan on them, and they were probably more than halfway done. And I mixed them together into 1 pan and used that up. And I don't think any of the bronzers I used up were like brand new or full. A lot of my bronzers, pretty much every bronzer I have right now is almost full, or if I've used it a lot, there's still a ton of product left. So I don't think I'm actually going to be able to use up any bronzers next year. For cream contour, I only used up 1 years ago. It was like a little mini ABH contour stick. I do have 1 cream contour product from Charlotte Tilbury, but I've only used it a handful of times. So depending on how much I reach for it, this could be empty by the end of next year, but it's definitely not something that I'm going to actively try to finish. And then for powder contour, I don't use a lot of separate powder contours. I do have 1 eyeshadow that I use as a contour, but again, contour is just not a step I think to use, especially when I'm just in person in real life, because sometimes contours can look a bit harsh, like they look better in photos or on film than they do in person. For blush, I actually used up a full-size blush. It was an Hourglass blush, and that one I think already had pan on it at the beginning of the year, and it took me a long time to finish it in its entirety. I, again, don't think I'm gonna have any blush empties next year, but I do have a lot of blushes that I would consider panning. I'm just not there yet mentally. For cream and liquid blush, I did use up 1. I do have 1 liquid lipstick that I'm going to use as a liquid blush next year, and I am going to do my best to try to finish it in its entirety. Hopefully next year this number will be 1 again. For powder foundation, I used up 2. I do like using powder foundations. Powder foundation is one of those things where I use it once whenever I'm running late or I just want to have something quick, and then I remember how much I enjoy using it, so then I just keep using it, and then I keep using it straight until it's gone. Like I get into these moods where it's like all I want to wear because it's just so easy and convenient. So I used up 2 last year. I only have 1 in my collection right now, but I've used it a lot, and so that will likely be an empty next year too. For face primers, I used up 1. I don't really go through primers that quickly. I know it looks like I used a ton in 2020 and 2019. I used up 4 and 3, but I'm imagining those were probably like moisturizing primers. I do go through those more quickly than I do like pore filling primers, just because I don't need as much product whenever I'm using those pore filling primers. I might finish 1 of the Too Faced primers just because it's smaller and I've already used it a ton. I've actually already cut it open so I can get everything out, and then I have 2 full travel size of the same primer. So I'll probably use up that one from Too Faced that I have open, but I don't imagine any of the other ones are ones that I could realistically use up in a year. As for SPFs, it says 0, but I think I've used up a couple, maybe 3 or 4. I counted that as makeup last year because I wanted to motivate myself to get in the habit of using SPFs every day, and I would kind of use them as like a priming product on top of that. I didn't count them as makeup this year, and I don't plan on doing that in the future. I didn't think to track that number again. I guess I forgot since I'm not counting it as makeup this year. So that is not an accurate, that's not accurate. Whatever. And then for setting sprays, I used up 4, which is pretty similar to the amounts that I used up in previous years. All of my setting sprays, again, are brand new, or I've only used them like a handful of times, so I don't think my number will be that high in 2022. Now for lip products, I really wanted to make an effort to use more of my lip products up this year, and I definitely did that. So I used up 13 products this year. I only used up 6 last year. So it's safe to say I crushed that goal, which is great. It feels great. I will say it is a bit skewed because 4 of the lip glosses that I used up were minis, and so they didn't take as long to use up as like a full-size lip gloss would. That does make it seem like I used up way more lip gloss than I did. I skipped all the other categories. Let's move back up to lip pencils. I used up 3 lip pencils, which felt great. They were products that I had been wearing for a long time. I didn't have a lot left, but they still took a long time to use up. For lip primers, I only used up 1 in 2017 and 1 in 2019. I bought one from Ulta and I had one from MAC, and I used those up, and I haven't purchased any since, so that number is likely to be 0 again next year just because I don't own any lip primers and I don't plan on buying any. I did use up 1 lipstick, which feels great. I used up a Charlotte Tilbury lipstick this year. I used up a Charlotte Tilbury lipstick last year, and I plan to use up another Charlotte Tilbury lipstick next year. We'll see. I'm going to try to be diligent about that. I am wearing a Charlotte Tilbury lipstick today. I'm wearing a combination of the mauve NYX lip pencil with Pillow Talk Medium. Really love that combination. So just, just trying to be diligent about making sure I'm using them because they are some of the most expensive and fancy products in my collection. I really like them, and I just need to remember to use them more. So hopefully I'll have another lipstick empty next year. For lip glosses and oils, I used up 5. Only one of them was a full size. 1 lip gloss in mind that I would like to finish next year. And then I have a couple minis that I'd also like to finish, but I don't know how realistic that is of a goal. So I'm hoping that this number is at least 1 next year. Maybe if I'm lucky, maybe if I do well, it'll be more than 1. For liquid lipstick, this is probably going to be 0 again. I'm not sure if I want to count the ABH Crush liquid lipstick that I'm currently using as a cream blush. I don't know if I'd want to use that as a liquid lipstick empty or as a cream blush empty, because I did use it a lot as a liquid lipstick whenever it was not as old, and then once it hit a certain age, I didn't want to use it on my mouth anymore, so I used it on my cheeks. So I think when we look at the amount of times I've used it, I've probably used it more as a cream blush than I did as a liquid lipstick, but that's not technically what it is. Yeah, so I think I'll make it whenever I do use that one up. Hopefully, whenever I use it up, I will consider it a cream blush instead of a liquid lipstick. What do you think? Let me know what you think I should do. And then for tinted lip balm, I used up 4, and I've used up 4 every year for the past couple of years. I only used up 2 in 2018, but that seems like a pretty standard thing for me. I do count those NYX #ThisIsEverything lip loving balms. I do count those as a tinted lip balm because even though they don't leave a ton of pigment on your lips, they are pretty brightly colored red in the pot. So I do count that as a makeup item. I do have a couple like actual tinted lip balms in my collection. So yeah, I feel like this number will probably be around the same, if not more, next year. But yeah, using up 13 products, that is more than double the amount of lip products I used in the previous year. That does feel really good. And when I do plan on using my lip products more and just remembering to grab for different products, like I said, I'm gonna focus less on trying to finish things up and more on making sure everything is getting an equal amount of love. So I don't imagine this number is gonna be that high next year, but maybe that'll prepare me for the following year. I know it's like maybe a little bit too much to be thinking into 2023. So I think 2022 is going to be a year for me to like make sure I know all the formulas that I have, I know all the products that I have, and then in 2023 I'll already have some progress on the products that I do want to finish. So let's look at the comparison of what I used up that's cruelty-free versus not cruelty-free. I don't know if I'll continue following this metric or tracking this metric, just because things change. Their status changes all the time. Like there's tons of brands that I had a lot of products from and then they stopped being cruelty-free, or they recently became cruelty-free, and it just seems like a lot to have to go back and like change it as a cruelty-free product versus not. And then there is also a lot of gray area about what it is considered to be cruelty-free. Like, what does it mean for a product to have that status? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'll continue tracking this metric, just because it is hard to tell what is versus what isn't. So from my knowledge, it seems like I used up 52 products that were cruelty-free and 3 that weren't. If you can see, I used up a ton of non-cruelty-free products in 2017 and also quite a few in 2018. That's because I was transitioning into cruelty-free. And I think the ones from this year and last year were brands that were cruelty-free when I purchased them, and then their status changed while I owned them. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. So when we look at each category totaled up, I used 14 eye products, 28 face products, and 13 lip products. And that means I used up more across each category than I did in the previous year. And I think also in 2019, with the exception of face products, I used up 1 more face product than I did in 2021. I used up a total of 55 products, which is super exciting. And I used up $840.85 worth of makeup, which is more than last year, not as much as the year before that. But it seems like I usually use up anywhere from $700 to $800 worth of makeup a year. Now for the very last metric, and that is what I used up versus what I spent. This year I used up just under $841 worth of makeup, but I spent $977 worth of makeup. So I did spend more, about $130 something more than what I used up. I don't think that's too bad of a range. It's not like I spent like $2,000 and I only used up $5 worth of makeup. Like I'm glad that they are at least sort of close. Ideally, I would like to be using up more than what I bring in. I got really close last year. I think I was only at $12 off from having spent less than I used up last year. Next year, I don't really think I'm going to have a ton of makeup empties. So I am going to have to keep that in mind when it comes to spending, just so that that range isn't too outrageous. I don't really think I'm going to set like a low buy or a no buy or anything, but I do have a lot of content for the stuff I have. There are only a few products that are kind of piquing my interest right now, and a year is a long time. I can't say that I'm not going to want to buy something at some point next year, but for now I feel like I'm good with what I have, and unless I run out of a category, I don't really feel like I need to have any big hauls. And I usually only do like 1 big haul during the Black Friday sales towards the end of next year. So yeah, I don't really think I'm going to set any rules, but I don't really feel like next year is going to be a big spending year for me personally. Now let's look at the goals that I set for 2021. I really only had 3 main goals. The first one was to focus on expiring cream products. My main way of doing that was going to be through the Partners in Cream Project Pan. That's also a goal I had set in 2020, and I feel like I did a really good job at focusing on expiring cream products then too, and I feel the same about this past year as well. The Partners in Cream Project Pan is a really great way for me to do that, and I also do keep track of how old all of my products are. So whenever I buy a new product, I put the month and the year in a little spreadsheet so that I know like what my oldest products are, and I take that spreadsheet into consideration whenever I'm planning my project pans. And I feel like I do a pretty good job at rotating the oldest stuff in and making sure that's getting focused on first. And I plan on setting that goal for myself again next year. I just think that's like a really good ongoing goal because cream products do tend to expire much faster than powder products. I also had a goal of hitting $1,000 in makeup empties. I have mentioned before, it's an arbitrary number. It doesn't really mean much because you could use up 100 makeup products, and if they're only like $2 a piece, then you're not gonna hit your $1,000 goal. Versus if I've just used up and focused on a bunch of really high-end brands, I could use up fewer products but still hit that $1,000 goal. It's not rooted in anything, and it's definitely not something I'm gonna plan to try to hit next year. It's just not possible. It's just not possible. I do not have $1,000 worth of makeup that I can really realistically finish next year. So that's not a goal for next year. And even though I didn't hit it, I don't feel that bad about it. I still used up $840 worth of makeup. You'll see my goals for 2022 are very, very different from what they have been in past years. The goal that is the same, and I imagine will stay the same into the future as well, as long as I continue buying cream makeup products, is I'm going to continue focusing on expiring cream products, especially lip products. And I plan on doing that through the Partners in Cream project pan. I'm gonna do that again next year. I think it's a great project pan. I love the premise. So definitely an easy goal to set, and one that I don't think I'll have any problem hitting. Another one I'm going to try to focus on is calming down on the amount of eyeshadow and cheek products that I buy. When I say cheek products, I mean highlighters, bronzers, blushes. I already have so many of those products. I do really like buying them. Those are like some of my favorite products to own and buy and try new formulas and stuff. But I have so many in my collection, I don't want to neglect them. So I think 2022 is going to be a year where I really try to calm down on how many of those types of products I bring in so that I can focus on the ones that I have. And the last one I have talked a bit about in this video so far, here and there, and that is to focus less on completely panning and more on rotating and using everything. And you'll see that reflected in the project pans that I will be giving introductions for. As much as I love project panning, as much as I have learned about myself and about my makeup habits and about what motivates me, it is not something that I feel like is 100% sustainable at the pace that I was going. I jumped into project panning and I went hard, and I was doing multiple pans at once. But I have found when I was trying to look at what I wanted to put in project pans next year, I found that a lot of my products I had already panned, and the ones that were left were products that didn't really have a ton of use on them in the beginning. So I want to do better about that, and I figured the best way to motivate myself would be to make rotating them a part of the project pan, and that way I'm still able to track progress and set goals and do the organizational stuff that I love about project panning, but do it in a way that is a little bit more sustainable, or just a little bit better about using up or using all of the products in my collection and not necessarily trying to focus on just one product at a time. Anyway, this has been a very chatty video. I feel like I had a lot of things that I wanted to talk about, a lot of feelings I wanted to share. Let me know if you're feeling the same as me, if you think you're gonna do project panning a little bit differently next year. From watching people's finales this month, I do feel like a lot of people are sharing the same sentiment as me, where they maybe don't want to do so many projects at the same time. They don't want it to become a chore. They want to keep it fun, and maybe they just want to scale things back a little bit just to keep themselves from getting overwhelmed. Either way, I'm so excited to see everybody's numbers, everybody's end of the year makeup empties videos. It's just such a fun time to be able to look at everybody's numbers and kind of just get a little sneak peek into what they are able to use up in a year and what type of goals they're going to set for themselves next year. Anyway, in the meantime, that's everything I have. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys!